Thanks for joining me. In this video, we're going to get stuck right in. In case you're new to the channel, this is my wife's 1987 Honda Rebel 250. It's a CMX 250, otherwise known as Barney because of the wineberry, I believe Honda called it, color of the frame. This is not...
Mike here. Sorry for the interruption, folks, but I just wanted to let you know I am trying out a new wireless microphone and I don't have the volume quite set right yet. So you will hear static from time to time. It's not your stuff. It is me being an idiot and not having my microphone properly set. All right, on with the show.
The original color, it's not the original tank. So in this video, my job's gonna be to cut down the front fender. Gonna do some hammering on the front edge of the fender. And you'll see in the video why we need to do that. I need to make some mounts. I think I'm gonna go with a kind of a fork brace style mount. And hopefully, when I'm done, I'll have trimmed the front fender to size. I may try and roll the front edge or tip it over just so that it's more rounded instead of just straight sharp metal. I've got to weld it all together. I've got to do all the metal finishing on it and then get it all mounted up. And then once the front fender's finished up, then I can start working my way, you know, towards some other projects in a bike. I got to sort out the whole front end where the headlight is. So there's still stuff to do. At least the bike was running, you know, as full working order before we started all of this craziness. Good grief, Barney's been off the road since 2017. So it's about time I get this crap done. I'm gonna put my safety glasses on real quick because they're prescription and I can't see without them. A little bit of work's been done off camera here and I'm gonna go over some of the stuff that I did in preparation of doing the front end. I'm not sure, but the front end might be a little bit more difficult than making the back fender. I have never made mounts or cut down a fender before I started working on Barney. So this is all new to me and you're all coming along for the ride. So either we're gonna have a win or an epic failure, or I'm just gonna have to keep working on it. Speaking of epic failures, check this out. This is epic failure. I took some of that wire I'd used before and I just wanted to know on Barney's front fender here exactly, you know, what kind of radius I was dealing with and how big the curve needed to be. This guy here is an original Honda Rebel fender because I'm going to scrounge the, I believe this holds a speedo cable off the tire. I'm going to drill out the spot welds, pull it off, strip the paint off of it. And then this little bit here holds the brake hose in place. And there's kind of a rubber grommet on the factory brake hose. Now I need to get a custom brake hose made. The original one with the shorter, you know, tracker style handlebars. It's way too long, but I'm still going to reuse the grommet because again, it keeps the brake hose and the speedo cable from hitting the front wheel as it's rotating. That's probably the closest piece I had that fit the radius. And from a distance there, it looks okay. But I beat the living hell out of this thing with a hammer. It's got so much damage on it that I would end up filing away most of the radius. This one's probably a better result, but what doesn't show up very well for you guys is that is kind of asymmetrical. I found out when I used my bending form here that I made out of wood, I didn't get quite both sides the same radius. And so my best results was when I took and bent 1/2 of it at a time. So I clamped this up in my bench vise behind me here, 6-inch vise, and I literally just heave-hoed the steel around the form there. That was a test radius there from a scrap that I'd used before, and then that was an abject failure. I tried to use my ring roller at the tightest radius I could, and all it did was put a kink in it. That may have been cool for like a sissy bar or something. And then here's another radius that looks okay, but it's got a kink there, and there is just all kinds of just marring and just been beat to hell. So again, that doesn't work. It's a good thing this steel is cheap. Again, it's just, you know, it's just weld steel from the local Ace hardware store. After all of that, I finally figured out the process, and I have 2 radius pieces of steel that are actually exactly what I need for Barney here. That is heavy duty steel. It was a lot of fun bending that. I gotta make mounts for the forks, figure out how I want those mounted to the mounts, figure out the angles, how I want it to interact with the front fender. But I think the first thing I need to do here is actually cut the front fender, get rid of all the additional, offcut from it, because it's just getting in the way. This fender is almost covering half of the wheel. I've been actually kind of struggling to figure out where I want to put the front fender here. After much debate and much looking, over the bike and the lines, how everything goes, I've reached a compromise. For starters, the duck bill or the duck's tail of this fender with the center bead from TC Brothers, I don't like the way it looks on the front. Kicking up in the front looks a little weird. This is definitely supposed to be a tail, like a duck's tail, right? This, where this fender kicks down, is actually kind of pointing to where the down tube from the head tube, the down tube here, there's like a split in it where it becomes like a wishbone and it cradles underneath the motor. This kind of points to that intersection, and it's at a level where it's almost straight across from the exhaust port. So now I just have to figure out, on the front edge where I want to cut it. Comes straight up from the center of the axle and kind of eyeball where that's going to end up being, and just Sharpie this sucker right there. That's where I want the front edge to end, but I think I'm going to cut it about, I don't know, say like 30 millimeters or so that way, because I want to try and be able to bend the leading edge over. I'm going to tip it over and roll the edge under. The next thing I need to do is I need to get a radius cut into this. These are going to come in handy here in a minute. I really like the radius on the front fender of my wife's 2007 Triumph Speedmaster here. So I'm actually going to copy that edge just with a piece of 8.5 by 11, standard printer paper here that I snagged out of the printer. And really, I only need to trace one side, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make half a template, because I might not draw it straight on the center line. So if I make one half, I can trace it on the fender, flip it over, and then I should have identical shapes on both sides. What we're going to do is just trace around it here. This ain't got to be perfect. Gonna mark this dude as my center line right there. Cut this half out, and then we'll put it on the fender on Barney, and you'll see what I'm talking about. The fender on the Speedmaster is actually a little narrower than this fender is. So instead of going directly off the center line, I'm actually going to take it from the edge of the bead on the fender. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up with my cut line there. And then I'm just going to draw it to a point. I think that point's going to be about right here. Need to transfer that to the back side because I need to flip this over to make a mirror image of it. What I got to do is I got to continue the radius down to the edge of the fender, because again, the fender on the Speedmaster is just a little bit narrower. Got a little tick mark there where I stopped. So that's that side. I'm digging that. And I might play around with these radiuses a couple of times here. Come over here, flip my template over, line it up on the bead. Gonna make a tick mark to start with, and trace this dude also. There we go. It's one of these deals where you need like 3 hands, man. Oh, gotta put the hat on backwards. So I'm gonna make a couple of rough cuts with the old death wheel just to get the fender to the right dimensions. And then we'll sand it up on my little belt sander and get it, right on the line. Safety third. With quite a bit of flapper wheel action, after I cut this dude off. Like, look, I could use that dude for another project. Look how much I chopped off of it. I never intended on using the whole thing. I noticed that TC Brothers actually made this out of a couple pieces of metal. You can see right there kind of where the join was. And there was another one that actually ended up being part of this. So right where I cut it, I can see there's some imperfections from the metalworking. This is all going to get body worked, so it's fine. This is a magnet with a screw in it, because now that it's so short, when I put it where I wanted it, it wants to go bloop and fall off the bike. See, that magnet with that screw on it hooks onto my my piece of foam rubber that I'm using as a spacer. And let's see, am I lined up? That I am. That's what Barney's going to look like. the front fender is going to look like. I've got my dad's old Craftsman ball peen hammer. This thing's got to be 40, 50 years old, probably older. You're not supposed to hit a hammer with a hammer, I know that, but I need to use this guy right here because it's the right size. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chuck it up in my 6-inch vise. As they say, do as I say is not as I do. Yeah, you get the point. I would not dead blow against a hammer like that, but I'm using this as a buck, you know, a hammering dolly. I want to stretch this metal here on this front edge to take this hump out of it and just make it so it's a straight line across. This metal's pretty damn thick, so it's going to take me a while to just go at it. But what I want to do is I want to ease the edge down, and then I'll reestablish this radius after I've got the shape. I just want the end of this, where the bead is, to be spherical. I was going to try and make a tool to like tip the edge over and fold it. Man, this steel is way too thick. There's no way I can do that. I would distort the living hell out of this. So I'm just going to have to make sure I've got a good sand on it, no sharp edges, so that when it gets painted, I don't have a problem where the paint draws away from the edge of the steel. That's going to be the same situation with all of the edges on the fender, even, you know, the duck's tail on the back. So let me get the hammer in, and I'll show you what the progress looks like when I'm through it. Status update. I don't know how well you can see that, but this edge is just starting to round down a little bit. I need to shrink where the bead is on the side there, and then roll it over and kind of form it over the top of that ball peen hammer as the hammering die. But you can see I've already taken quite a bit of that hump out. You know, I have to stretch the steel this way, and then I've got to shrink it on the ends. So these little lines here are from this side of the hammer, and also I got a little pick here, and so I've got to kind of dimple at it like a golf ball. And those impacts will kind of shrink the metal up. As you can imagine, if I take a piece of flat paper and I try to bend it over a sphere, you know, it's going to crimple up in some spots and want to stretch and tear in others. So I kind of have to manipulate the steel around to get it to the final shape. Alrighty, more beating with a hammer. Status report here. I think we got her. I don't want to take it much further than that, because as I'm stretching the metal over this way, it's getting thinner, and that's the front edge of the fender. So you look at that, you know, is it perfectly flat? No, but that's got a nice, you know, spherical kind of rounded profile to it. That's what we started with. That's where we're at now. I would not want that to be the leading edge of the front of the fender. You see, that looks way better than what that would look like. You know, even if you cut that to more of a radius because it's kind of square, that's definitely a better look. So let's put it on Barney. I ended up taking the foam out, and I don't know if you can see it. I just have some hoses in there, and then I've got a block, just some scrap aluminum block zip tied in place so that the fender stays put, and is now at the height that I want it off of the tire. Let's measure the spacing I need for the bosses on the fork to determine how wide of a bracket that I need to make up here. I don't want to have to use, like, you know, the old metal stretcher. The bosses end to end, not to center of the mounting holes, are about 7 centimeters. Give myself, let's see, like, I don't know, 2 centimeters on either side of it, give or take, a total of 11 centimeters. Sounds like a plan. So we'll do 11 centimeters. Get this out to 11 centimeters here. Use my metalworking square here. All right, that's my 11 centimeters. Chop this dude with the death wheel, and then mark another one out because I need 2 of them. Alrighty. So, let's see. Excuse me. I got 2 of these dudes cut to 11 millimeter now. I'm going to use my calibrated eyeball, I think. Now you can't see this very well, but Bear with me. Man, this thing's a mess. It's filthy. Forks must have been leaking on this bike. That's all I gotta say. I went ahead and used the original fender to mark the centers there. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna double check them. All right. Yep, them's the centers. I'm only marking one because what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp them together and drill them both at the same time. That way I know the holes are exactly the same spot. Be no guessing. Start my pilot holes. Do the inner one first. I don't really have proper cutting fluid, so I use WD-40. It's okay in a pinch. At least it's transparent enough, except for the air bubbles. Yeah, there. See my center. First hole down. A little bit of WD-40 here. I'd say the only downside to using this as cutting oil is sometimes it gets a little fizzy and it's hard to see where the there it is. To use the force and feel for where the the center punch hole is. Yeah. All right, get that dude out of it. Usually, it's not as hard to enlarge a hole as it is to initially drill it out. Let me clear the shavings and stuff off the top. My dad always called this stuff Weasel Whiz. I don't know why. So I call it Weasel Whiz. That sucker ripped right through in no time. It's because I got brand new sharp M6 bits. Watch taking that dude off. He's going to be hot. There you go. Or just throw it on the floor. Briefly hit it with the countersink just to deburr it a little bit. I find that if you're using these fluted bits to deburr, get one that has at least 5 flutes on it. The ones with only 3 flutes on there, or 4 flutes, they tend to chatter more, and they don't leave it as smooth. That's it. She's deburred. Now I can bolt these guys up on Barney, and then we can start fitting and mocking up the rest of the bits. Get this bolted in. And unless you mount the fender before you put the front wheel on, you're going to have a little bit of a clearance problem getting the tools in here to do the job. Now, when everything's painted and polished and powder coated and all that good stuff, I don't know what order I'll do it in. I know I'll be real careful. All right, let me get the other one in going. You know, it's crazy to think what you can build, or, you know, custom motorcycle stuff that you can fabricate just using stuff from like the Home Depot or, you know, Ace Hardware store, you know, Menards, Lowe's. Just got to be careful, you know, what you're picking and what you're looking at. Another bolt hole that doesn't want to cooperate. There he goes. Kind of have to feel for it. Don't have a lot of clearance to get my hand in there. Even with the stock tire on there, I mean, it's kind of a challenge get your hand back in there to thread these bolts on. It's I think they probably want you to pull the front wheel off the bike to do it. And I ain't doing that because I have to have the fender on and the tire to make sure I know where everything's going to clear. So patience is a virtue here. I've got the bracket all mounted on there. You can kind of see the clearance that I have. I mean, there's plenty of clearance to the tire here. But I'm going to weld the round bar to the outside of this bracket, and then it's going to hoop over and kind of make a fork brace. Same deal on this side. This is the part I was telling you about on Barney in particular. There's like 1/8 of an inch of material that's been filed and sanded off of these threaded bosses that are cast into the fork sliders for the fender mounts. So let me think. I think the next part here is going to be mocking up the hoops that I've already bent up, because I need to cut the hoops to length, and then I need to get the magnets and mock it all up the way it's supposed to be, and then I can put my little spacers on there, the little steel, mild steel spacers like I used on the back, mark where the through holes are going to go, drill the fender out, bolt up the spacers, and then use the magnets to hold these guys in place, and then I can tack it up. Pull the fender out, pull the fork brace off, and then I should be able to fully weld it. In theory. Let me get this marked on the other one and then get it cut with the death wheel, and then we'll continue here. Oh boy, fun with the death wheel. Alrighty. I was about to get all fancy using this Klein angle gauge to figure out the angle of the head tube, but the more I messed with it, the dumber it looked. I mean, for me, it doesn't matter if I weld it at an angle or I weld it, you know, straight up and down. But while initially I thought, you know, having the fender mount / fork brace at an angle that matched the head tube sounded like a cool idea, when I did the inverse angle on the back, they were just too far apart. That's just a straight hoop right there, like a regular fork brace. And I think that's what I'm going to run with, because the more I look at it, the more I like it. So I've got a little bit more of a gap above the brace, and it's just held with magnets right now. I don't have everything perfectly squared up, but visually, you know, I've got this gap on the back where the sissy bar is, and then that kind of is reproduced here. I think that looks pretty cool, honestly. I think this is what we're running with. These rare earth magnets, man, I know I keep talking about them, but they're freaking great. Love it. Pair them up and they hold this whole thing together. No clamps needed. It's been about a week since we last worked on the bike, and I needed a little bit of time to sit and think about how I was gonna do the fork brace, and I think I got a plan, so we're going to go ahead and implement it, and hopefully it turns out right. I've got the bike protected. I'm using this vice grip to ground out the bar stock that's bolted to the fork slider. I've got everything where I need it to go. I just need to get it tacked well enough that I can pull the fork brace off the bike. Again, the fender's not involved with this show right now, so I just need to tack this dude up and then pull it off the bike and fully weld it. Main objective here is just to get this tacked up in place. Again, mediocre welding skills, so I'm basically just gonna get it together, and then I'm going to sand, grind, file, and you know, make it look like a nice finished part. Ah, smoke. All right, that should be stuck. Give that a chance to cool off for a minute or two. I'm gonna let the part that I've tacked up cool just a little bit, and then I'm gonna unbolt it, take it off, make sure everything's still cool, and then we're gonna fully weld it. I've got the fork brace fender strut off the bike, and now I just need to you know, lay a weld bead in there and fully weld it. I'm probably going to have to clamp this stuff in just so it doesn't move on me under the heat. So I'm going to vice grip this together and then try and fully weld it. Got the initial tacks done, and I've got some full welds here. They're not the prettiest, but you know, I'm trying to get like tons of heat penetration in there. I guess what I could have done is I could have drilled some through holes on the little side plates and then plug welded it with the welder setup as high as I could get it. But this is going to be good enough for now. I mean, I actually kind of beat this with a hammer just to make sure it wasn't going anywhere. So now I'm going to kind of cut this down, cut the extra length off the ends here because I let the hoops run long. I'm going to cut it down and then start grinding on it, and then if I have any voids, I'm going to weld those up. So I'm going to use a cutoff wheel first to take the bulk of the material off. Before I do that, let me mark on here with a Sharpie which way is the front, just so I know which way it goes. All right, let's get the cutting. Let's see, we'll cut the longest one first. Now that it's cut the length, I just got to work on bringing the sides in, and the rest of it I'm going to do with the grinder. I notice with the round bar and the cutoff wheel, as you get further into it, the cutoff wheel gets more dangerous, so you got to watch out because it wants to bite and jump. And if you're not watching, it'll get you. The initial grinding done here. I got the bulk taken off the sides and kind of leveled out the top. Come in here and stack a bunch of little tack welds beside each other. Try to make my prettiest welds to date. I'm not going to grind those off, and I got to get them right down in the joint there. Because as I'm finishing this edge off, I'm looking at it from the top down, and I don't have a hell of a lot of weld. I mean, I do. I mean, I can look along edges like this and see I have full penetration. So this bar stock and the round bar have fused to each other, but it's not as strong as I'd like it to be. So I've gone through here and cleaned up all this stuff. So I'm going to weld it. It's got the right bacon frying sound. I went ahead and I threw down some weld here because, you know, this is going to end up being a fork brace, so I need it to be strong. And I ended up having to make 2 passes at it because of the thickness of the round bar compared to the flat bar there. And so now I'm going to dress the welds a little bit, but I'm not going to try and blend them and make them, you know, perfect. It is what it is. I mean, you know, honestly, they're not TIG welds, they're MIG welds, and they look at least as good as the factory Honda ones, but I can blend it a little bit. Mainly, I think maybe on the outside edge, I'm going to hit it with a flapper disc just to round it over and then just sand it. But the inside welds, I'm going to leave them the way they are. You're really not going to see it that well, and once this is all powder coated, it's going to be fine. The main thing is that it's strong. It doesn't twist or torque around. I was going to add an additional brace at the top that kind of like, you know, strengthen this area, but I don't really, to get it on the bike with the wheel still on the bike requires kind of fishing it in at an angle. And if I put a bar across the top, which is probably overkill for this Honda Rebel, this is already stiffer than the front fender is, which is all it ever had. If I do that, then I can't put this on without taking the front wheel off, which kind of makes servicing the bike a bigger pain in the butt. So I'm just going to leave it like this, and then I'm just going to have like the little spacers that I'm using to mount the fender. So I need to file and sand and grind this and make it look nice and clean up some of my grinding marks where I had some welding spatter. So this is only a 120 grit flapper wheel. And if it was a cutoff wheel or a different type of grinding wheel, I'd probably wear my face shield. It's very rare for these type of sanding discs to explode. So to make it a little more comfortable for me to sand, I'm going to just use this without the shield. But the 120 will take out a lot of the grinding marks and also kind of the whatever spatter was left over. And the rest of it I'm going to have to sand by hand. So just got to get at it. I think I'm coming up with a good balance. I'm going to leave these welds as is in the middle. I'm going to round off the edge here. Because when it's bolted on the bike, the forks are basically going to be, obscuring the view to these welds. And I've left enough material on there, I don't know, like a few mils, 1/8 of an inch, however you want to count that, to make sure that I didn't grind through the strength of the weld. So I just will hand file this over now and make it look nicer. And I think that'll be good. Don't look too bad. Only got one little pit right there, and it may file out. If it doesn't, I'll just zap it real quick and then file off that. And then this should clean up pretty good. Then I could bolt it back on Barney, and then we can start fitting up the fender. So this process is going to take a while. Just clamp it up. I got some sacrificial mild steel in here so I don't leave milling marks. And I'll go out it with a rough, like a mill bastard file. And then I'll come in with my finer files and my rat tail file if I need to. And well, this is going to take a good long time, so we'll check back in when I'm finished here. So I've been going after this dude for about, I don't know, 40 minutes with angle grinder. I had a 60 grit flapper disc in there, and I've got a 120 in there now. And I've got it to the point where, get these guys set aside here. I've got it to the point now where I'm going to start sanding it. So this is my compromise. I have ground not flush, but from the radius of the round bar into the weld, and then radiused over onto the flat bar. And I'm going to leave the very, very high temperature welds that I did in the middle, to keep the strength in this part. I mean, I got this thing screaming hot. I know I've got full penetration on the welds here, but like when it's on the bike, primarily you're going to see this front edge, and it's going to get powder coated, so you're not going to see all the little, stacked dimes on the welds, because I sure as hell don't have them. One of the guys said in the YouTube comments in my last video, what is it? Grinding in paint makes you the welder you ain't. Well, that's me. So anyhow, I'm going to chuck this up and start sanding away on it. And because it's round bar, and I want to keep it round, hence the name, what I've done is I found this sandpaper here, and I just realized I didn't cut a very straight strip, but it's got kind of like a cloth backing, but it's just like regular sandpaper, so it's a little bit more flexible. And I'm just gonna like shoe shine it right around the radius, just to start out with, to make sure when I've gone over it, with the angle grinder, and I've kind of probably made some flat facets onto the part, I want to take those flats off of there and reestablish a nice radius, because the crappier I leave the metal part in its current state, the worse the powder coat's going to look. So I want to try and make the metal look as nice as possible before it gets sandblasted and powder coated, and then the finished result should look pretty professional. At least that's what I'm hoping, right? So I'm going to do this for a while. I'm going to sand the whole part up. It's probably going to take me over an hour. I'm not going to bore you guys with that, so I'm going to sand and you're going to skip ahead. All right, after a really, a really long day of filing, sanding, and grinding, this is what I've got. I'm leaving these basically untouched welds because I don't want to weaken the joint. And these here, I have an asymmetrical, kind of like where the infill is still there, but I blended it into the round bar. And that is sanded up to 180 grit sandpaper. So now I'm going to put this back on Barney. I'm going to put a little bit of oil to protect this for now. Bolted on. So let's get the fender put back up into place here. Love that. I'm so happy with how that came out. I should be able to just weasel this under here if I got all my little clearances right. I believe we are centered up. There we go. The next step is going to be making little standoffs for this to mount to, and I'm still kind of on the fence exactly how I'm going to do that. I might just do it from the sides, just a simple bolt-on affair. I'm thinking about that. I could do the standoffs like I had before, or I could weld some nuts on there and then put the Allen screw in from the back side. Still working on that idea, but that looks pretty cool. Let me get you in close. While this must be normal for people who do fabrication all the time, for me, because I've never really done this work, like building fork braces, fitting fenders to motorcycles, I only ever really did stuff that bolts on. Granted, it takes a lot of time. Probably if you're an expert at this stuff, it wouldn't take you so much time. But for me, I have to think about it and then come up with a strategy and then execute it. But I think that looks pretty damn good, considering that was just a bunch of stuff I bought at the local Ace hardware store. And that fender was never designed to be mounted onto a Honda Rebel, but yet here we are. I think that looks pretty sweet. And let me step back a few steps here. Get the whole picture of Barney with the new front fender on there. Man, that's going to be sweet when this bike's done. I have this line that kind of has this low rider look in the back, and I'm digging that. If it was a cafe racer, I'd want to have that level to the ground, but I kind of like it drag bike style. All right, so I now have to figure out how I'm going to mount the fender to the fork brace. But that turned out pretty good, I think. I mean, can't argue with the results, and I know that that's super strong. So I've cleverly hidden my shitty welds, and powder coat's gonna make them look fine. So, yep, grinding in paint makes you the welder you ain't. Perfect. So I think we're gonna wrap up here, at least for this video, not for the work I'm doing. But fork brace turned out really good. I'm pretty happy with that, considering I've never built one before. I'm thrilled with the results. Can't do a better job until I make about 20 of them. But I think in the next video we'll continue on. I'll make the little mild steel spacers, get those all put into position, drill the fender, and get prepared to mount the fender to the fork brace. And that'll wrap up Barney's front fender, other than just the bodywork stuff, and that comes later after all the fabrication's done. So thank you for hanging out with me. Thanks for watching. If you can do me a favor, go ahead and like the video. Give it the old thumbs up. Click on the notification bell and subscribe if you haven't subscribed before, because it'll really help me and Melly out as we try to get Barney done. Hopefully, possibly, maybe this year. We'll see. Life always seems to be getting in the way on trying to get projects done, as you're well aware. This thing never seems to end. Anyhow, who knows? In the future, Melly might actually come out in the garage and hang out. She doesn't really do fabrication work, but as we get closer to putting it together and doing that kind of stuff, I'm sure she'll come out and join me, because that's the fun stuff. Anyhow, again, thanks for watching. Much appreciated. And until I see everybody again, ride safe.